Hey everyone, Rory from LZH here, and today I'm being joined by the one, the only Puwexil. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm not doing too badly. So, first and foremost, let's get to know you a bit better. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, by day, I am an information technology professional. I work in the corporate IT department for a large American healthcare services company where I've been for about 10 years, actually. And my current role there is I am a data center systems engineer. So I work with basically building and supporting servers in our company's data centers all over the country.
That sounds it sounds pretty it sounds like a large amount of work though to me. It just sounds
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I do have to. I mean, I have to work nights and weekends sometimes for doing support and maintenance, so interferes with my personal life sometimes, but not too often, thankfully.
That's good. So, let's get started. Let's just roll the clock back a few years. So how did you initially get into speedrunning then?
Sure. Well, that's kind of a two-part story, which the second half of which is something no one would ever actually suspect about me. So, my first kind of exposure to the whole concept of speedrunning was way back in, I believe it was 2000 when I played Final Fantasy IX for the first time.
Mm.
Because because for anyone that's not familiar with the game, there's a really powerful weapon called the Excalibur 2 that you can get if you get to basically the final boss effectively in under 12 hours on the game timer. And that just blew my mind when I found out about that for the first time, that it was actually possible to basically beat a PlayStation JRPG in under 12
Mm.
hours. I never actually did that back when I first around when I first got the game, just because I just wanted to do everything instead of try
Mm.
to beat the game as quickly as possible. But that was still kind of my first, just kind of my first exposure to the whole concept of speed running. And then you kind of fast forward about 5 years or so. Um, and in roughly about maybe somewhere around 2005 or so, I was doing 100% playthrough of Metal Gear Solid 3, and I was using an FAQ to as an that had an item checklist and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the FAQ was actually written by the then record holder for speedrunning the game, and he had a link to his run that was posted on SpeedDemosArchive in his FAQ somewhere.
Mm.
So yeah, I checked that out, and then that kind of blew my mind. I mean, there weren't anywhere near as many runs posted there as there are now, but I
Mm.
pretty much ever since then, I visited the site periodically to watch new runs that had been posted, and then I never really got interested in doing runs of my own until maybe about 2010 or so. That was basically when both streaming and speedrun charity marathons kind of really started to take off.
Mm.
So it was kind of around when the first games done quick marathon, classic games done quick that only had like 20, 30 people. It was in Yama's basement happened. I kind of just watching that kind of inspired me to want to get more involved with the community and start doing runs of my own. So the very first game I actually ever tried to speed run was Illusion of Gaia. I didn't actually
Mm.
finish a run of that until much later, but that was I first started working on runs of that game, and then I eventually picked up Kingdom Hearts 2 and bridged into the Final Fantasy series from there.
I'm actually quite glad that you brought up Speed Demos Archive because a lot of
Mhm.
people know that you're quite a prominent member of SDA at the moment. So how did you like get into being such a like a large part of the SDA team?
Well, I mean, it isn't really too exciting of a story. I mean, I just got more involved in the community through like the forums and IRC channel and being in people's stream chats and that sort of thing. In like starting in 2010, 2011 or so, and then in I think it was like somewhere at sometime in the spring of 2012, the one of the Speed Demos Archive admins that had been handling the submission and verification work for runs that people submitted. Had some changes in his personal life that made it so he no longer had enough free time to do that anymore. So I guess the other admins asked me if I wanted to at least take over the submission handling part of that, and I said sure. So basically, what that means is that I'm kind of the point of contact for people that want to submit runs to the site, as far as getting the information off of them, as far as like what game it is, what category they're doing, kind of making sure that they're following the guidelines as far as having a high quality recording through like Amarek TV or a DVD recorder or something,
Mhm.
and then I guess just work with them to get them to upload the videos that we can start the community verification process.
Hmm. Well, that's pretty. That's actually really. That's a lot more interesting than I thought it would be actually. Like like the SDA verification process has always like intrigued me because
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's a lot that goes into it. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot that like a hell of a lot of stuff that goes into that, isn't there? So what,
Mm-hmm.
like, just for like, I guess someone who wanted to submit a run to SDA, what would you be like your first thing that you tell them, like the very basics about the verification?
Well, the very first thing I'd always tell anybody that's interested in submitting a run to SDA is to post a video quality capture test on our in our tech support forum before you start doing serious attempts at your game. Just because just the expectation is just that it's that people submit a high quality recording like you'd get from Amarek
Mm.
TV or a DVD recorder are the main things people use, and especially if you're using Amarek TV or Virtual Dub or some other kind of PC capture program. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that process. If you use all the default settings in Amarek, there's going to be an ugly watermark from the video encoder in the corner. So we just want to make sure that people just that if there's any issues with somebody's recording setup, that we can get fixed before they get a really good run, that they end up not being able to submit because it's just some kind of silly technical
Mm.
thing. That's really just the main thing that I'd just encourage anybody that's interested in doing it, the because once you have that recording, it's pretty straightforward from there. There's basically just a form that you fill out where you just say what the game is, what category you're running, and then attach some
Mm.
comments to that you want to be passed on to the verifiers, and then also posted with your run on the site if it gets accepted. And then it kind of pretty much just gets taken by us from there. We post the game in our verification forum for people to volunteer to verify it. And if somebody wants to volunteer to be a verifier, all we really just ask is that you have played the game yourself and have
Mm.
some kind of general sense of what a good speed run would look like. And then after we've gotten a couple verifiers, we send the video to them and just ask them to watch it and write some comments on if they think if it's a run worthy of being posted on our site. And then for kind of more obscure games that not a lot of other people have
Mm.
played or heard of, we also have a public verification process where after somebody submits a run, if it's been 30 days and we haven't gotten enough verifiers, then we've just posted publicly on our forum for basically anybody to watch and just write comments based on if on the, like just on pure entertainment value and gameplay quality without really knowing a whole lot about
Mm.
the game. And it's really good for the runners that go through that process to have written decent comments to accompany the run too, just explaining why they made the choices that they did,
Yeah.
and if they made any mistakes or even things that look like mistakes but were actually done on purpose, like for RNG manipulation or something like that, so that people will know.
Well, it's always been a process that's very intriguing to me, and so I'm pretty glad that you actually gave a lot more of an in-depth answer to that as well, which is really good. Um, so yeah, let's talk about how you got into Final Fantasy speedrunning, because as far as I'm
Sure.
concerned, you're pretty much one of if you want to get into Final Fantasy speedrunning, then like you and Karakan are the two people that you just need to go to. That's like You need to get like your two channels are the two you need to check out.
Yeah,
Um,
as far as kind of just who runs the most Final Fantasy games, I think we probably do the most games. Like I find it kind of interesting that he kind of starts at FF7 and then goes forward into the
mm,
PS2 games, and then I go backwards to the Super Nintendo ones. Like
mm,
the Final Fantasies that interest me the most are the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 games, just because I've kind of thought. I mean, I've actually had to think about that recently too, because I get asked a lot, like, when are you going to run Final Fantasy 10 or 12 or 13 or
mm,
something like that. I've never those games don't really kind of interest me as much as the earlier ones, and I've had to kind of give some thought as to why exactly. And I'd say kind of the single thing is just that the 4 through 9 use the active time battle system, where the
mm,
battles progress in real time, but with a lot of things you can do to kind of to manipulate that, as far as like how often your characters versus enemies get to attack and that sort of thing. And I found I really kind of enjoy that element that the real time battles add to something, as opposed to a more turn based RPG, like something from the Dragon Quest series or
mm,
Final Fantasy X, which is a lot more based on turn rotation than on
mm.
in real time. Just because for most of these games, you're playing on the fastest battle speed for a speed run in order to get done as quickly as possible. So having that kind of adds an extra element of tension to it too, as far as having to think and make decisions as quickly as you can, um, in order to get the outcome you want.
Hmm. So what would you say? I know you said that Kingdom Hearts 2 pretty much led you into speedrunning the Final Fantasy games. What was the very
Mm-hmm.
first Final Fantasy game you run? Like, I know that you said that 9 was the first one, or the one that kind of got you into the idea of
Right.
speedrunning, but what was the first one?
The first Final Fantasy game I worked on speedrunning was 7. That
Mm,
was back in like summer maybe of 2011.
mm,
Um, Kind of the main thing that instigated that was just that there'd been interest expressed in having that at Awesome Games Done Quick in 2012.
mm,
So and yeah, and there hadn't really been a whole lot of work done on running the game single segment or RTA style
mm,
back then. There were only maybe like one or two other people that had done that, because before that most of the I mean, there'd been a lot of work done on speedrunning FF7, but it was mostly segmented. Like
mm,
there's a really high quality speed FAQ on game FAQs for FF7, but it's more geared towards a segmented run than a single
yeah.
segment or RTA. So I kind of used that as my starting point, as far as learning the game, learning like the story triggers you need to hit in order to advance it, kind of the what the more powerful weapons, equipment, and abilities are. Then I found some notes for single segment by a guy by the name of Lolo26, who'd kind of been active in the scene, like maybe back in like the early 2000s or so, and then I guess kind of either lost interest or moved on to other stuff because he hasn't been heard from quite a while. But he'd posted some notes on, I think it was like the GameSpot forums or somewhere like that, that I was able to use. And that was the run I did at AGDQ 2012 was mostly based on that, and it's really kind of both funny or interesting and embarrassing for me to look back at that too, just because of how different it was. Because like I had to do like 15 minutes worth of level grinding in order to actually be able to beat Demon's Gate,
Oh,
and like I didn't know how to do step count manipulation for random
mm,
battles, and strategies I used for the end game involved learning the Ultima spell, which is a pretty slow casting
mm,
animation for it too.
yeah.
So quite different. But yeah, so 7 was the first Final Fantasy game I learned. Then after that was 9. Um, Again, that was also, I kind of picked that up because there'd been interest in having it at charity marathon. Um, so I ended up working on that together with Spike Vegeta. who had already done some work on planning to run the game before I picked it up too. So that was around around when we were working on that was around the time too that the gap was starting to get bridged a little bit between the Japanese and Western speedrun communities, because the reason why Spike had done some work on FF9 before that and then stopped was because of not really being able to figure out a way to beat the final three bosses without doing a bunch of leveling. And the key that we found in being able to beat them was we learned from watching videos of Japanese FF9 speedruns on a website called Nico Nico. That's kind of the Japanese equivalent of both Twitch and YouTube, because there's both live streaming and then just videos that people upload to. So yeah, we learned a lot about the game from watching some Japanese runs, and then then after that I got into FF5 just because another thing that kind of interests me about all the Final Fantasies that I run too is just they all have similar elements as far as like the real-time battles and having like menuing that you need to learn to do quickly, but they're all different too as far as what you need to do in order to be able to beat bosses at low levels and to avoid having to do more than a few minutes of level grinding or so too. And what interested me a lot about FF5, just from not even really watching other runs, but just what I knew about the game was how winning battles was a lot more based around like manipulating enemies' levels and AI in order to be able to set up killing them instantly with some kind of with a death spell or something like that, which is very, very different from FF7. Well, I guess I should say FF7 no slots, which is how I run the game, and FF9, which are just more based around doing a lot of damage quickly and exploiting elemental weaknesses and that sort of thing. And I guess then I learned FF5 first on the PlayStation Anthologies version, and then the Super Famicom version with the English patch too, which is a much better version of the game for loading times and sort of thing. And then 6 is the next one I picked up. For 6, even though 6 is the kind of the Final Fantasy with the most history to it as far as speedrunning in the American and Western European scene. Pretty much like starting with Essentia and then Mr. MV and a couple of other well-known people. I wanted to do something a little different with it too, as far as doing glitchless 6 runs, because that's just a very different kind of run. And just like with 9, a lot of my inspiration for that came from watching Japanese FF6 runs, because in their community they actually ban glitches for FF4, 5, and 6. Which really it puts a lot of restrictions on what you can do, but at the same time it gives you more freedom for how to route the games too, just because if you're using glitches there's often just kind of one way to do it that lets you beat the game as fast as possible. But if you ban that kind of allows for runners to have a lot more creativity, and that's especially true in 6 because of how the second half of the game is very, very non-linear and open world.
So, what would you say is out of the? I know that you've said that the older Final Fantasy games that you prefer those because of like the way that the active time battle system works and all that. What would you say if you could pick one of them? What would you say is your favorite one to run?
well, let me think about it, because I do get asked a lot what my favorite Final Fantasy is, and I've kind of made a joke out of that too, where I always tell people to read the FAQ in my Twitch channel, which says, "What is your favorite Final Fantasy?" Answer: no, just because that's an argument that can never be won, no matter what, because people are opinionated about just games they like, period. But especially it seems especially true for Final Fantasy games. But that's such a tough question though, because like I said, all of the Final Fantasy games that I run, I like for different reasons.
Mm.
Because just because, but I guess maybe as far as my top two right now, I would probably say six and seven.
Speaking of Final Fantasy VI, you recently hosted on your channel a 456 relay. So
Yes.
I at first I watched the beginning of it and thought this is possibly one of the coolest things I've seen someone do on Twitch so far. But then of course I got hit by the dreaded, oh yeah, we need you in for the next 3 days bug from
Aw.
work. So yeah, I wasn't able to catch very much of it. But
Mhm.
can you tell us a bit about like what kind of planning went into that? Because it looked
Sure.
to me like, I mean, you had 12 people pretty much running like through one stream, like 4 games at a time. Like what
Mhm.
went into the planning behind that?
Sure. Well, the inspiration for the Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6 relay was came from two places actually. Because sometime last year I saw a very similar event on Nico Nico where they had four teams of three Japanese Final Fantasy speedrunners doing a relay race, and it really, I mean, even though I mean, I couldn't really understand what was going on too much, both because it was
Mm.
in Japanese and because of the size of the windows. It looked really really cool, just because they had because Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest are really really popular in Japan. Like, I mean, even more so than in America and Western Europe. So it looked almost kind of like an esports tournament when I saw it too, just because they had these people that were doing announcing and commentary for the whole race. Like, I don't think they actually had any of the runners speaking. They just had these kind of announcers doing it. And then the comments people were posting on the stream just kind of had tons and tons and tons of hype behind it. So yeah, that was one of my inspirations, and then the other one was a Mega Man series relay. That there was actually just another one yesterday, organized by a guy named Joka. He did his first one back in like January or so, I want to say,
Mm.
where he had two teams of runners do Mega Man 1 through 10 back to back.
Ooh.
So that kind of inspired me to see if there was enough interest in trying to do a Western Super Nintendo Final Fantasy relay.
Mm.
Kind of the reason why Super Nintendo Final Fantasy is just because the games are a lot shorter than say like the PlayStation or
Yeah.
PlayStation 2 ones. I mean, like uh, 4, 5, and 6 are roughly like 4 or 5 hours each, depending on game and player skill and route. And and then the routes for them to make it so that randomness, or RNG as we like to call it in the speedrunning community, doesn't really. I mean, it can swing times by a couple minutes, but it's not going to be like say the card game in Final Fantasy VIII, where you could
Oh.
literally be it's like 20 to 30 minutes just because the game won't give you the cards that you need in order to continue the run. So and also then there's also just length too, because doing like
Yeah.
about a 13 14 hour race is a lot more doable as far as kind of hosting it all through one stream and have just finding runners that are of similar skill levels and that are all available
Yeah.
on the same day too, just for logistical purposes. So yeah, so then I basically just started a thread on SDA forum to see about interest and wanting to do a relay. And I thought I was going to have to kind of beg to try to scrape together like 2 or 3 teams, but I ended up
Mm.
having so much interest that I had no trouble at all really putting together 4 teams. And I guess as far as the planning was really just finding a date that worked for all of the runners. Making sure they make, I guess, finding categories for the games that the runners were all comfortable with,
Mm.
um, and uh, and then just figuring out the tech setup too, as far as restreaming all 12 runners individual streams on
Yeah.
mine to make a 4-way race view. Because that was something I'd kind of been on the fence about too, is because the downside to having to doing the restreaming setup is just that that limits it to 4 teams. Like it wouldn't really work to have more than that.
Yeah.
But but in hindsight, I think that was definitely the right move because it let me kind of it let us have one focal point for the event, basically like one chat room
Hmm.
that and also made it easier to promote the event too. Like I was able
Yeah.
to get the relay on the front page of Twitch TV, which helped a lot as far as getting more hype and attention.
Hmm.
And and also that made having only 4 teams made it easier for viewers to follow what was going on too, as far as like who was ahead or behind, and what strategies people are using and that sort of thing. If they just have one stream to watch instead of having to kind of shift around depending on
Yeah.
who's playing at the time. So I definitely want to do it again, maybe sometime. Maybe I could see it being maybe like a twice a year thing where we do it like
Hmm.
in the spring and in the fall. So for the fall, I'm going to keep it to 4 3 people teams, and I guess if there's more interest than there is room, I'll just have to decide based on player skill levels and just when they're available to play too.
Yeah. Well, I remember I was watching it during the first. It was just about the first hour or so that I was able to catch, but just in the first
Uh huh.
hour, you'd managed to pull in a really, really large number of people. Like
Yeah,
it was like a couple of
I
thousand easily.
the 2 goals for the relay were to get over like around 2,000 Twitch viewers or so at the
Hmm.
peak, and also to have less than an hour spread between the first place and fourth place finishes.
Hmm.
And the we met the second goal. It was ended up being about like 57, 58 minutes between first place and
Hmm.
fourth place. Actually, second and third place were only 21 seconds apart, which was
Wow.
insane for a 13 plus hour race. But
Hmm.
then we actually peaked at over 5,000 viewers at one point during kind of the finale of Final Fantasy IV too, which just smashed my expectations beyond belief.
Hmm. Well, that like yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was. I saw it when it was about 3 or 4 thousand during the middle, or doing it like just an hour or so in. Um,
Mhm.
but it was just such a phenomenal not phenomenal event, and I'm
Mhm.
really annoyed that I missed most of it, unfortunately. But so what was
Yeah,
the
I mean, I did save all the
hmm,
videos, but that's obviously not the same as watching it
yeah,
live,
hmm,
knowing who's going to win and lose and
yeah.
that sort of thing.
So what team ended up winning the relay though? That's a pretty important one, I guess.
Well, it was Team Egg because actually we decided to name the teams after kind of memes and jokes in the
Hmm.
Final Fantasy speedrun community because excuse me, in Final Fantasy IV, there's a monster you can run into at one part of the game called Egg, and I mean, the egg is just, it's an enemy that doesn't do anything unless you attack it, and then it hatches into another type of monster. But we just find it hilarious that you can get back attacked by an egg, which is that you have an egg that doesn't do anything, just sneak up behind you and attack you, basically. So whenever somebody does a Final Fantasy IV run, the chat always starts to get spammed by egg whenever they run an egg. And so yeah, so we named the team that won was Team Egg, and let's see, then there was also Team Wyvern because the PlayStation One version of Final Fantasy V has one of the worst English translations of any RPG I've ever played, and the way that they translate the monster Wyvern or Wyvern is Y space burn is is how they translated a wyvern in that version of the game. So
Wow.
yeah, we decided we named that's another thing that's kind of just a frequent in joke to represent bad translations and that sort of thing in the community. So had another team named after that, and but yeah, and Team Egg actually did not get the most eggs in the relay too. It was actually Team Wyvern that got the most eggs because when we had the before part of the race, when they went into the tower where you can meet eggs, we had a running tally of who got the most eggs too.
So while we're on the topic of RPGs, there's also the Crystals for Life marathon coming up that you're
Yes.
going to be a part of. So what
Yes.
games are you running for the viewers?
I'm going to be running Final Fantasy VI, glitchless, either any percent or 100% if the donation incentive gets met. 100% being, meaning getting all 14 playable characters and all 26 espers, and then beating the game. And then also Illusion of Gaia, I think is just going to be 100% with an incentive to actually fight the optional boss. That's part of the 100% definition.
Mm.
So I think that's kind of an interesting setup too, just because I'm going to be playing the first game I ever worked on speedrunning, which was Illusion of Gaia, and then also the one that I've done the most recently, which was
Mm.
FF6.
That's pretty neat as well. I know
Yeah.
that you're also going to be doing couch duty, as people like to call it, for a few games as well.
Yes.
What
Hmm.
what runs are you doing? Are you going to be around to talk about for all the viewers as well?
I'm trying to remember what else. Yeah, because I signed up for a couple of other games. Like Essentia is doing Final Fantasy IV
Mm.
with major skips, also known as Die Hard percent to a lot of people. I signed up for that. I think I signed up for Lufia 2 by Abda Jr., Final Fantasy III NES by Duckfist, and maybe one or two others. But I think the full schedule should be posted on the marathon site, which is crystals for life one word.ca.
Mm.
That's also where people can watch the marathon once it starts too. And unfortunately, I'm blanking on the exact start dates, but it's basically the last week of April going into the first week of May.
Mm. Right. Well, that pretty much wraps up all the questions I have for you at the moment.
Mhm.
So is there anyone that you'd like to give any shout outs to while we're here?
Um, well, just shout outs to the other SDA community admins too for all the work that everybody does, which is kind of thankless in a lot of ways too.
Mm.
And I guess for me personally, shout outs to I guess probably the three people I'd kind of say were my inspirations for getting into speedrunning myself were Essentia, Rain of Soten, and Josh the Funk Doc.
Mm.
Um, who basically were kind of the first speedrunners I followed, and were all very supportive and encouraging of me to get involved myself.
So
And
where
I guess I'll shout outs to everybody that played and helped promote the Final Fantasy Relay too for making it such an amazing success.
so where can all of the viewers find you on social media like Twitter and all that?
Sure. Well, my Twitter is just at Puwexil, Puwexil.
Mm.
It's also, and that's my Twitch channel too. And I'm on YouTube as Puwexil608 too, because for some reason YouTube and PlayStation Network were the only two places where just the name Puwexil was already taken.
Yeah.
But yeah, Twitter and Twitch are where I'm kind of most active. And then I like to post videos of my PBs and highlights and bloopers and stuff on my YouTube too. But I always advertise those on Twitter when I do.
Mm. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the interview for today. So thank you very much for stopping by and letting me pester you for a half an hour.
Oh, my pleasure.
And to everyone watching at home, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time for another edition of the Gold Split. So